There is a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from pain. In the quiet village of Alder's Hollow, surrounded by thick woods and old stone paths, people spoke in hushed tones, and no one played music in the streets anymore. Not since the day little Alara vanished. It had been 5 years, 5 long years since the golden-haired girl with the soft laugh and love for birds ran into the woods behind her house and never came back. There were no screams, no signs of struggle, just a doll dropped near the trees. And then, the nothingness. Search parties came, dogs, drones. But the forest swallowed all traces of her. Her parents, Mira and Jonas, never moved away. Some said it was denial, others said it was hope. But Mira would always say the same thing when people asked why they stayed. What if she comes back and we're not here? Their house sat at the edge of the village, closest to the woods. It was small, painted light blue, its edges worn by time and memory. Wind chimes still hung by the window Alara used to peek out of. Her room remained untouched. Each morning, Mira would walk outside with a cup of tea, sit on the front steps, and look toward the trees, just watching, just listening. And that's when she noticed the corvo. He first came in early spring, a sleek, glossy black bird with sharp eyes and slow movements. Unlike the others that flitted through the sky, he didn't seem to be in a hurry. He landed on the crooked chimney of their house and just watched. Day after day, he returned. At first, Mira thought nothing of it. Corvos were common in the area, and many believed they brought omens. But this one felt different. He never made a sound, never cawed. He simply stood there as if guarding the house. It became a ritual. Tea, steps, corvo. The neighbors began to notice too. Some whispered, others called it eerie. But Mira, strangely, found comfort in him. She named him Noir. One morning, Jonas joined her on the porch, the sun barely a breath over the horizon. "He's back again," he murmured, staring at Noir. "He never left," Mira replied softly. "He always comes at the same time." Jonas tilted his head. "What's he looking at?" Mira hesitated. "Alara's window." They both fell into silence. Wind brushed through the pine trees, and the wind chime rang a delicate, lonely note. Over the weeks, Noir's presence grew bolder. He began to fly lower, landing now on the porch railing, even hopping to the windowsill of Alara's room. But still, he made no sound. Until one morning, he did. It was a Sunday. The village church bell had just tolled 8 a.m. Mira had her tea in hand. Jonas was still asleep. Noir flew in like always, but this time, he landed on the porch table, stared directly at her, and opened his beak. And what came out wasn't a caw. It was something else. A sound, broken and raspy, but unmistakably human. It sounded like a child saying, "Hi, Mama." Mira dropped her cup. It shattered on the wooden floorboards. Her breath caught in her chest. She blinked. Noir flapped once, then flew back to the chimney and perched as if nothing had happened. She didn't tell Jonas that day. She couldn't. Maybe she imagined it. Maybe it was just a trick of the wind. But the next morning, it happened again. "Hi, Mama." And then, a second phrase. "I found a feather." Tears welled in her eyes. Those exact words were something Alara used to say all the time. She collected feathers from the woods and showed them off with pride. Now, Mira was afraid to breathe too loudly. She didn't want to scare Noir away. For days, Mira said nothing. She told herself it was grief. Echoes of memories twisting into sounds. She knew the mind could do cruel things when the heart stayed broken too long. But the voice from the corvo kept returning. Always in the morning. Always short phrases. always in that soft, innocent tone, like a child mimicking language, uncertain but familiar, and it always came from Noir. "Look what I found. It's shiny. I'm hiding." Each phrase pierced her like a needle through fabric, sewing together hope and fear in the same breath. Mira started recording him. At first she felt ridiculous, holding up her phone, sitting still with tears drying on her cheeks. She didn't show the recordings to Jonas. Not yet. Not until she was sure she wasn't slipping away from reality. She played them back late at night, lying in Alara's room. Her fingers gripped the edges of her daughter's pillow, her ears straining. There was no doubt. Those weren't bird calls. They were words. But how? She began reading about corvids, watching documentaries, listening to wildlife biologists. She learned that corvos, ravens especially, could mimic sounds, including human speech. Some lived decades. Some formed attachments. Some remembered faces. But this was more than mimicry. Noir wasn't just repeating, he was remembering, recalling things no one outside her family could know. One phrase changed everything. It was raining that morning. Mira sat under the porch roof, watching the water run down the path. Noir flew in through the fog, wet wings heavy, and landed on the windowsill, Ilara's windowsill. He tilted his head, looked straight at Mira, and croaked something uneven, strained, but clear. "Mama, don't cry." Mira's heart stopped. Because that wasn't just any phrase. That was exactly what Ilara had said to her the night before she disappeared, when Mira had come home crying from the hospital after losing her mother. Ilara had climbed into her lap, wrapped her tiny arms around her neck and whispered, "Mama, don't cry." She had never told anyone about that moment, not even Jonas. That night, Mira broke down and showed him the recordings. They sat in the kitchen. She played them, one by one, Noir's strange, breathy voice filling the room. Jonas stared at the phone, face pale, unmoving. "That's her," he finally said. "That sounds like her." Mira nodded. Her hands trembled. Jonas rubbed his temples. "But how? We never had recordings of her talking outside that old birthday video." He pulled out a dusty laptop, opened the family archive. They watched it again, Ilara's 4th birthday. Her little voice saying, "It's shiny," as she unwrapped a gift. Then laughing, "I'm hiding," as she darted behind the couch. Every word matched. "Could she have spoken to the bird?" Jonas asked. Mira's eyes were glassy. Before she vanished? She loved them, fed them, sat outside for hours. What if the bird was with her when it happened? The thought made her blood go cold. If Noir had been there, really been with her, then he knew something no one else did. But what? The next morning, word started to spread. Mrs. Corbin, their elderly neighbor, told someone at the market what she'd overheard, a bird speaking like a child. Soon, people were whispering on the streets of Alder's Hollow. Some came to see it. They stood across the road, hands in pockets, eyes wary. Noir ignored them all. He perched, he stared, and sometimes, when only Mira or Jonas were nearby, he spoke. Not every day, not every hour. But when the wind was just right and the silence settled heavy, he let the voice slip through. A child's echo carried on black wings. One day, Mira received a letter. It came from a woman named Dr. Elise Harrow, a specialist in corvid behavior at a wildlife institute. She had heard of the case and asked to visit. "I don't want media attention," Mira replied. "I'm not the media," Dr. Harrow said. "I just want to understand." They agreed to let her come. She arrived 2 days later, wearing a soft green coat and carrying a small recorder. She was gentle, respectful. Noir was already on the porch. Dr. Harrow sat across from him. "Beautiful creature," she whispered. "Old, too. You can see it in the eyes." Mira watched. Noir tilted his head, then said, "Found a feather." Dr. Harrow didn't move. She pressed play on her recorder, then asked softly, "Where did you find it?" Noir didn't reply. He never spoke when asked, only when he chose. Dr. Harrow stayed 3 hours, listened, took notes. When she left, she told Mira something that only deepened the mystery. "I've seen corvids mimic speech, but this is different. He's not just repeating, he's contextualizing. That requires memory, emotional memory." Mira nodded, but said nothing. She already knew. Mira couldn't sleep. Not anymore. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the voice again, her daughter's voice, rising from feathers and shadows. Noir had become more than a presence. He was a thread connecting past and present, a whisper from the void that had swallowed Alara. She began keeping a journal. Day 27. She's hiding. Day 29. Don't cry, Mama. Day 30. I saw a deer. She transcribed each phrase, time-stamped it, and sometimes noted the weather. Patterns emerged. Noir was more vocal on cloudy mornings, and when crows flew in groups nearby, he went silent. Jonas was skeptical at first, but after the 10th clear phrase, he started helping. He built a small platform near Alara's window where Noir often perched. Left offerings, coins, shiny buttons, pieces of ribbon, things corvids were known to like. Noir never touched them. Then, something changed. He started leaving things. At first it was a green marble, placed neatly on the windowsill. Then a dull, rusted ring. Then a plastic toy elephant, the kind sold in dollar stores. And Mira gasped, recognizing it instantly. Alara had one just like it. Blue, with a scratched eye. She had lost it 2 weeks before she disappeared. More items followed. All small, all strange, all seemingly connected to Alara. The most haunting was a white shoelace, tied in a knot, the exact way Mira used to tie Alara's shoes when she was learning. Jonas stared at it in disbelief. "This can't be coincidence," he whispered. "These aren't just random shiny things. They meant something to her." Mira nodded. "I think he's showing us." The village grew tense. Whispers turned to rumors. Some said Mira had gone mad. Others believed the bird was a spirit. A few teenagers tried to throw rocks at Noir, but he vanished into the air before they could come close. He always returned, each time more deliberate, more present. Dr. Harrow visited again. This time she brought an audio specialist. They recorded Noir in high definition, then matched the waveforms to the birthday video. The results stunned them. Not only were the voice patterns identical, but the timing and inflection of certain phrases matched emotional tones from the video. They concluded that the bird wasn't just mimicking sound, he was recreating emotional context. "I've never seen anything like this," the specialist admitted. "It's as if the bird remembers her." That night, Mira stood by Alara's window, watching Noir. "Were you with her?" she asked softly. "Did you see what happened?" No answer, just a slow blink. Then he hopped down, flapped once, and flew into the woods. It was the first time he'd left at night. Mira felt something shift inside her. The next morning, he didn't return. And the next, and the next. The silence was unbearable. It felt like losing Alara all over again. Jonas tried to reassure her, but Mira was inconsolable. "What if we pushed too far? What if we scared him off?" She left food out, trinkets, whispered apologies into the wind. Nothing. On the 5th day, something unexpected happened. She heard a knock at the door. When she opened it, no one was there. Only a small bundle placed gently on the doormat. Inside it, 3 objects wrapped in moss. A tiny plastic spoon with teeth marks. A photo of Alara at age 3, missing since the disappearance. A button from Alara's favorite sweater. Mira fell to her knees. These weren't things she had misplaced. These were items that had vanished the same day her daughter had. Suddenly, she knew. Noir hadn't just seen Alara. He had been with her. Wherever she had gone, whatever had happened, he had followed. Not as a pet, not as a wild animal, as a witness. That evening, Mira made a decision. She placed the photo, the button, and the spoon in a small wooden box. She tied a piece of Alara's hair ribbon around it, then walked into the woods. Jonas followed without question. They walked past the search boundaries, past the trail markers, deeper than anyone had gone in years. There was no path, only instinct. They called softly, "Noir?" No answer. Until a low flutter. He appeared like a ghost, landing on a broken branch ahead of them. Mira's breath caught. He stared at her, then turned and flew. Not fast, slow enough for them to follow. Through the trees, deeper, darker, until they reached a place neither of them recognized. A small clearing lit by golden light slipping through the canopy. And there, nestled in roots and moss, lay something unexpected. A circle of feathers, trinkets, toys, stones stacked like a child's shrine. In the center, Alara's favorite doll, weathered but whole. Mira fell to her knees. She didn't speak, didn't cry. She only placed the wooden box gently beside the doll. Noir landed nearby and let out a soft, low call. It wasn't a word. It was a goodbye. The forest was never the same after that day. The clearing where Mira and Jonas found the shrine became sacred ground, not in any religious sense, but in the way memory sanctifies space. They returned often, always quiet, always carrying something small, a ribbon, a note, a flower Alara would have loved. Noir visited less frequently now. Sometimes he circled above the trees, watching. Other times they heard his wings in the distance, but he no longer spoke, as if his message had been delivered, and now he could rest. Still, the questions remained. How much did he really know? Was he simply imitating, or was there something deeper, something no science could explain? Dr. Harrow returned for a 3rd time, now with a full research team. She brought cameras, directional microphones, and heat sensors. She spent hours in the clearing, mapping every detail. The team even attempted to analyze the birds' flight patterns. Noir never came near them. He watched from the shadows, black against the canopy, and vanished the moment someone tried to approach. "He responds to you," Dr. Harrow said to Mira. "He doesn't trust us. I think he remembers." "But what does he remember?" Mira asked. "That," Dr. Harrow said quietly, "we may never know." The audio team processed months of recordings. They isolated every phrase Noir had ever spoken. Over 40 distinct utterances, all in a voice strikingly similar to Alara's, some in sentence fragments, others in full expressions. The most chilling was a phrase captured only once, barely audible through rain and wind. "I'm still here." It was never heard again. The scientists published a case report. They called it anomalous mimicry with emotional memory patterns. It stirred conversation in academic circles but never reached the mainstream. Perhaps that was a blessing. Because for Mira and Jonas, this wasn't an experiment. It was their daughter's shadow, flickering through feathers and time. The townspeople responded in their own ways. Some avoided the forest altogether. Others brought offerings to the clearing. A few skeptics insisted it was grief-driven delusion, but one visitor changed the mood entirely. A man named Lucas Wren, a self-proclaimed paranaturalist, arrived claiming he could communicate with animal spirits. He wore beads and carried incense, calling out Alara's name in the forest, trying to lure Noir into the open. Mira asked him to leave. He refused. It wasn't until Jonas physically removed him from the property that he backed down, spouting theories about cross-dimensional echoes and psychic transference. Mira didn't need theories. She needed silence. Noir didn't return for 2 weeks after that. When he finally did, it was sunrise. Mira was alone in the clearing, sitting beside the doll. Her hand rested on the wooden box she had left weeks ago. She felt a breeze brush her cheek and looked up to find him watching her from a branch above. She stood. "I won't ask you to speak," she whispered. "I know you've done all you can." He blinked. For the first time in weeks, he hopped closer, landing softly beside the box. He tapped it once with his beak. Then, with slow precision, he placed something beside it. A silver chain with a tiny heart-shaped charm. Mira gasped. It was Alara's, the necklace she'd been wearing the day she disappeared. They had searched for it everywhere. Her knees gave out. She sat in the moss, clutching the charm to her chest. Noir let out one soft, drawn-out sound. Not a word, not a call. Something in between. Then he flew off into the trees. Dr. Harrow later analyzed the necklace. It showed signs of age, dirt, exposure, but no blood, no damage. Nothing to suggest foul play. Nothing to explain where it had been for 5 years. "I don't understand it," she said softly, holding the chain. "But I believe this bird was with her." She paused. "Do you think she survived for a while, after she vanished?" Mira didn't answer at first. Then she looked out the window. "I think she wasn't alone." Weeks passed. The seasons turned. The air grew colder. The shrine remained untouched, guarded by silence and memory. Mira and Jonas found themselves breathing easier. The pain hadn't gone, but something deeper had settled in. A strange, quiet peace. As if some part of Alara had been returned to them, not in body, but in presence. They no longer needed answers. Only the knowing that love had lingered, in the trees, in the earth, in the wings of a crow who chose to stay. The day the wind changed, Mira felt it before she heard it. The forest, usually alive with the rustle of leaves and distant birdsong, was still. Not quiet, but still. Like breath held before a name is spoken. She was walking the edge of the woods, basket in hand, collecting wildflowers. Her steps followed an old habit, one that predated grief. One foot after another, past the fence, down the slope, into the memory of where Alara used to play. Then came the sound. Not from above, from behind. A flutter, a single wing beat. She turned. Noir. He stood on the stone wall that marked the edge of the old trail. The trail searchers had combed 1,000 times 5 years ago. He looked different today, not in body, in presence. There was a tension in him, like a violin string drawn tight. He tilted his head, looked at Mira, and then, for the first time in weeks, he spoke. "Come with me." The words struck like a bell in the silence. Mira didn't hesitate. She followed. The path he led her down was long forgotten, overgrown, veiled in moss, as if time itself had tried to erase it. Noir flew slowly, gliding from branch to branch, never out of sight. The deeper they went, the more the air shifted. The forest here smelled different, richer, damper, laced with something sweet and strange. Mira brushed past hanging vines, felt soil give slightly underfoot, heard only her breath and the steady flap of wings. Then, suddenly, He stopped. He perched on a low branch, just above a break in the trees, and beyond that, a hollow. She stepped into it, heart racing. It was a small clearing, shaped almost perfectly round, surrounded by gnarled oaks. In its center was what looked like an old hunting cabin, half-rotted, nearly swallowed by ivy. Noir landed on the windowsill. Mira's fingers trembled as she approached the door. It creaked open at her touch. Inside, the air was cold but not stale, as if someone had once breathed here, someone small. There were remnants, blankets, a rusted lantern, a cracked cup, and in the far corner, beneath a collapsed beam, something glittered. She stepped closer. It was a bracelet, pink, plastic, with blocky letters spelling Ilara. Tears blurred her vision. She dropped to her knees. This was where she had been. Mira could feel it. In the air, in the silence, in the aching heartbeat beneath her ribs. Ilara had come here. Maybe by accident. Maybe fleeing something. Maybe seeking. And Noir. He had followed her, protected her, watched over her. Jonas arrived minutes later, breathless. Mira had left a trail of ribbon markers behind her as she walked, just in case. He stood at the doorway, taking in the scene. She held out the bracelet. He stared at it, and for a long time, said nothing. Then he sat beside her on the dusty floor and wrapped his arms around her. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The space said everything. This was where it had ended, and perhaps where it had begun again. The authorities returned, this time not with dogs or search crews, but with archaeologists and forensic experts. They documented the cabin, preserved the items, treated the site with reverence. No human remains were found, only traces, belongings, soft footprints preserved in soil under a floorboard, faded pieces of fabric, enough to prove Ilara had been here, alone, but not abandoned. The official report would say, unsolved disappearance with new evidence suggesting prolonged survival. But that wasn't what mattered to Mira. What mattered was that for however long Ilara had lived in that place, days, weeks, maybe longer, she had not been alone. She had been with Noir, and Noir had remembered. The bird watched from afar. He never entered the cabin again. He perched nearby, quiet as dusk, and watched as they cleaned, recorded, and grieved. He didn't speak. But on the last day, as the cabin was being sealed for preservation, he flew down one final time. He landed beside Mira. She crouched beside him. He looked into her eyes and let out a soft, warbled sound. Not quite Ilara's voice, not quite his own, something in between. Then he opened his beak and whispered, "She wasn't scared." Mira sobbed, not for loss, for knowing. Grief doesn't disappear. It changes shape. It folds into silence, lives in the corners of rooms, in the soft light just before dusk, in the spaces once filled with laughter. For Mira and Jonas, something shifted after the cabin was found. They no longer searched for answers. They remembered moments. They no longer asked why. They held on to what was left. The discovery had not brought Ilara home, but it had brought her closer. They began walking the woods again, not to chase shadows, but to be near her, to feel her in the moss, the wind, the chimes she once made from sticks and string. The forest, once a place of ache, became a space of reverence. And always, nearby, but never too close, was Noir. He came less often now, but when he did, he never arrived empty. A small shell, a polished stone. Once, a folded leaf with a single blue thread. Each offering was placed gently on Ilara's shrine in the clearing, as if, even now, the crow remembered her rituals. and continued them. One morning, Mira woke before dawn. The sky was still dark, tinged only with the first trace of blue. Something called her outside, not a sound, not a thought, just a pull. She walked to the clearing alone. Noir was waiting. He stood beside the wooden box where the doll, the necklace, and all of Alara's found objects rested. His feathers shimmered in the dim light. He was still, but not silent. He turned his head toward her and said, clearly, gently, "Time to go." Mira nodded. She understood. This was his goodbye. He had done what he came to do. Watched, carried, remembered. He had delivered her daughter's voice back to the world, and now he would disappear into it again. Noir spread his wings and rose into the air, one smooth motion, cutting through the morning like a page turned. He did not return. Mira and Jonas never tried to find him again. Some things, they realized, are not meant to be kept. Some bonds are made not to last, but to heal. They built a bench at the edge of the shrine. Visitors began to come, parents, children, strangers who'd read whispers of the story in hidden corners of the internet. No one tried to disturb it. The village, once marked by tragedy, became a place of quiet awe, a sanctuary not for answers, but for remembrance. And every spring, just as the dogwoods bloomed, a single black feather would appear on the windowsill of Alara's room. Mira would smile, hold it gently, and whisper, "Thank you." Years later, a young girl asked her grandmother why there was a crow carved into the stone at the center of the forest. The grandmother knelt beside her and said, "Because he listened when no one else could. Because he spoke when she couldn't. Because sometimes love wears feathers." If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that even in loss, there can be light.